The morning alarm blared through the research station on Kepler 442b, cutting through the artificial atmosphere like a knife. Dr. Sarah Chen rolled out of her narrow bunk, her feet hitting the cold metal floor with practiced precision. 3 years on this rock, and she still wasn't used to the reduced gravity. Every step felt like floating, every movement required conscious thought to avoid launching herself into the ceiling. Through the reinforced viewport of her quarters, she could see the alien landscape stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Purple-tinged vegetation swayed in the methane-rich breeze, and crystalline formations jutted from the ground like frozen lightning. Beautiful, but deadly to human lungs without protection. The research station was humanity's first permanent outpost beyond the solar system. Established after the breakthrough in faster-than-light travel, it represented everything humans had dreamed of for centuries. They had found a world that could potentially support human life with minimal terraforming. The soil was rich, the climate stable, and early surveys had shown no signs of intelligent life. Sarah pulled on her standard-issue jumpsuit and made her way to the central hub. The station housed 47 researchers, engineers, and security personnel. They were the best and brightest Earth had to offer, handpicked from thousands of applicants. Each person had undergone rigorous physical and psychological testing. They were prepared for isolation, for the challenges of establishing humanity's first foothold among the stars. What they weren't prepared for was contact. In the communications center, Lieutenant James Rodriguez was hunched over his console, dark circles under his eyes suggesting another sleepless night. As head of security, he took his job seriously, perhaps too seriously. Sarah had noticed him becoming increasingly paranoid over the past few weeks, jumping at shadows and insisting on additional perimeter sweeps. "Morning, James," Sarah said, settling into the chair next to him with her coffee. The synthetic brew tasted like cardboard, but caffeine was caffeine. "Any excitement overnight?" Rodriguez looked up from his screens, his expression grim. Motion sensors picked up something moving about 2 clicks northwest. "Big. Bigger than anything we've cataloged." Sarah frowned. Their surveys had identified several species of local wildlife, all relatively small. The largest was roughly the size of a house cat, with 6 legs and what appeared to be photosynthetic skin patches. "Hardly threatening. Could be equipment malfunction," she suggested. "We've had issues with the sensors before." "That's what I thought initially." Rodriguez pulled up the sensor data on his main screen. "But, look at this pattern. It's not random movement. There's intelligence behind it." The data showed a series of contacts moving in coordinated patterns around the station's perimeter. The movements were too organized to be natural, too purposeful to be coincidental. Whatever was out there was studying them. Dr. Marcus Webb, the station's xenobiologist, appeared at Sarah's shoulder. His thick glasses were perpetually fogged from the humidity controls, and his hair stuck up in impossible directions. He was brilliant, but had the social skills of a particularly awkward robot. "Fascinating," Webb muttered, studying the data. "The movement patterns suggest pack behavior, but with a level of coordination we haven't observed in any of the local species." "You think we missed something in our surveys?" Sarah asked. Webb shook his head. "Impossible. We've been here for 3 years. We've cataloged every species within a 50-kilometer radius. If there were large, intelligent creatures nearby, we would have encountered them by now." Rodriguez wasn't convinced. "Maybe they've been watching us. Maybe they've been waiting." The thought sent a chill down Sarah's spine. The idea that they might not be alone on this world had been discussed during planning, but all evidence had suggested otherwise. No cities, no technology, no signs of civilization. Just a pristine world waiting for human colonization. "Let's not jump to conclusions," Sarah said, though her voice lacked conviction. "We need more data." The next few hours passed uneventfully. Sarah threw herself into her work, analyzing soil samples and atmospheric readings. The data was promising. With the right equipment, they could begin atmospheric processing within the decade. The planet could support millions of human colonists. It was during lunch that everything changed. The attack came without warning. One moment, the station's dining hall was filled with the quiet chatter of researchers discussing their work. The next, the lights went out, and something massive struck the outer hull with enough force to knock several people off their feet. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in a hellish red glow. Sarah found herself on the floor, her lunch tray scattered around her. The station's hull groaned under some enormous pressure, and she could hear the hiss of escaping atmosphere from somewhere nearby. Emergency stations. Rodriguez's voice boomed over the intercom. This is not a drill. All personnel to emergency stations. Sarah scrambled to her feet and ran toward the command center. Through the viewports, she caught glimpses of movement outside. Massive shadows passed by the windows, too quick to make out details. But she saw enough to know that Rodriguez had been right to be paranoid. The command center was chaos when she arrived. Station Commander William Price was barking orders while technicians worked frantically at their consoles. The main screen showed external camera feeds, and what Sarah saw there made her blood run cold. Creatures unlike anything in their survey data surrounded the station. They stood nearly 3 meters tall on powerful legs that ended in clawed appendages. Their bodies were covered in what appeared to be organic armor, chitinous plates that gleamed under the station's external lights. Most terrifying of all were their heads, elongated skulls that housed multiple eyes and what was clearly an intelligent gaze. They came out of nowhere, Price said, his usual calm demeanor cracking. The perimeter sensors didn't detect anything until they were right on top of us. One of the creatures approached the main viewport. It moved with purpose, studying the humans inside with obvious intelligence. When it opened what Sarah assumed was its mouth, rows of razor-sharp teeth were visible. But it wasn't preparing to attack. It was trying to communicate. A series of complex sounds emerged from the creature, modulated tones that suggested language. The universal translator attempted to process the sounds but came up with gibberish. These beings used communication methods far more sophisticated than the translator was designed to handle. How many are there? Sarah asked. At least 50, Rodriguez replied from his security station. Probably more in the surrounding area. They have us completely surrounded. Dr. Webb was at his console, frantically analyzing the external feeds. Incredible, he murmured. Look at their technology. Sarah looked closer at the creatures and realized Webb was right. What she had initially taken for natural armor was actually sophisticated equipment. The chitinous plates were clearly manufactured, with visible joints and what appeared to be integrated systems. These beings weren't just intelligent, they were technologically advanced. Can we establish communication? Price asked. Webb shook his head. Not with our current equipment. Their language appears to be based on harmonic frequencies far beyond our translator's capability. It would take weeks, possibly months, to develop a proper interface. The creature at the viewport was joined by others. They appeared to be discussing something among themselves, their complex vocalizations creating an almost musical quality. Sarah found herself oddly fascinated by their beauty, despite the obvious threat they represented. Then, the weapons appeared. The creatures stepped back from the station and raised devices that were clearly advanced weapons. Energy coursed along what appeared to be organic conduits, building to dangerous levels. The message was clear: surrender or die. Shields up. Price ordered, though everyone knew their defensive systems were designed for space debris, not alien weapons. Sir, Rodriguez said quietly, our weapon systems are minimal. We have hunting rifles and basic sidearms. We're not equipped for combat. Price nodded grimly. The research station had been designed for peaceful exploration, not warfare. They had assumed that if they encountered intelligent life, it would be primitive compared to human technology. The creatures outside represented a level of sophistication that made human technology look crude by comparison. Open a channel, Price ordered. All frequencies. The communications officer complied, and Price leaned toward his microphone. This is Commander William Price of the Human Research Station. We come in peace. We mean you no harm. The response was immediate. The creatures' weapons powered down, but only slightly. Their leader, distinguishable by more elaborate armor and additional equipment, approached the viewport again. It spoke, and, this time the universal translator managed to catch fragments. Trespassers, sacred ground, leave, or consequences. The message was clear enough. The humans were not welcome here. Sacred ground? Webb whispered. This entire region showed no signs of religious or cultural significance. Sarah was studying the creatures more carefully. Look at their equipment. It's biomechanical. They don't build their technology, they grow it. She was right. The weapons, the armor, even what appeared to be communication devices were clearly organic in nature, but engineered with precision that suggested centuries of development. These beings had achieved a level of biotechnology that human science could barely comprehend. We need to buy time, Price said. Rodriguez, what's our defensive capability? Minimal, sir. The station's hull can withstand their weapons for maybe an hour, assuming they don't have anything more powerful than what we've seen. The creatures outside seemed to understand that the humans were discussing their options. They waited with what appeared to be infinite patience, their weapons ready but not actively threatening. It was almost as if they were giving the humans time to make the right choice. Sir, the communications officer said, I'm detecting additional contacts. More of them are approaching from all directions. The external cameras confirmed it. What had started as 50 creatures was now over 100. They moved with military precision, taking positions around the station in a pattern that suggested advanced tactical knowledge. The humans were completely outmatched. But Sarah noticed something else. The creatures weren't positioning themselves for an assault. They were forming a perimeter, creating a containment field. They wanted the humans trapped, not dead. They're not here to kill us, she said suddenly. They want us alive. Price looked at her. What makes you say that? Their positioning. If they wanted to destroy the station, they would have done it already. They're containing us for a reason. Dr. Webb was nodding enthusiastically. She's right. Look at their weapons. They're powered down to minimum settings. They could have breached our hull immediately if that was their goal. The implications were both encouraging and terrifying. If the creatures wanted them alive, it suggested they valued human life. But it also meant they had plans for the humans, plans that might not align with human interests. The leader at the viewport was speaking again, and this time the translator caught more of the message. Given, warning, leave, sacred, breeding, ground, final, chance. Breeding ground, Webb repeated. This is their breeding ground. We've established our research station on their most sacred site. The revelation changed everything. They weren't just trespassers, they were desecrating something fundamental to these beings' existence. No wonder they had remained hidden during the initial surveys. They had been protecting this site from human contamination. What do we do? Rodriguez asked. We can't just abandon 3 years of research. But Price was already making calculations. 47 human lives against territorial rights of an indigenous species. The math was simple, even if the implications were complex. Prepare for evacuation, he ordered. The decision sent shock waves through the command center. 3 years of work, billions of dollars in investment, humanity's first foothold among the stars. All of it would be lost if they abandoned the station. But, as Sarah looked at the creatures outside, she realized they had no choice. These beings had technology that surpassed human capabilities. They had shown restraint so far, but their patience was clearly limited. The energy building in their weapons systems suggested they were preparing for final action. The evacuation pods can't carry everyone, Rodriguez pointed out. Maximum capacity is 30. Then, we make multiple trips, Price replied. Prepare the essential personnel for the first evacuation. Sarah found herself selected for the first group, along with Dr. Webb and the senior staff. As they prepared to board the evacuation pod, she took one last look at the research station. It represented humanity's greatest achievement, their first step toward becoming a truly spacefaring civilization. Now it would become their first lesson in cosmic humility. The evacuation pod launched smoothly, its engines carrying them away from the planet's surface toward the orbiting supply ship. As they climbed through the atmosphere, Sarah watched the research station grow smaller below them. The creatures had formed perfect circles around the facility, their weapons no longer visible but their presence unmistakable. "Will they destroy it?" she asked. Webb was monitoring the alien technology through the pod's sensors. "I don't think so. They seem more interested in ensuring we leave than in destroying our equipment." He was right. As the pod reached orbit, they could see the creatures beginning to withdraw from the immediate area around the station. They weren't vandalizing human technology or celebrating their victory. They were simply reclaiming their territory. The supply ship USS Endeavour was a welcome sight after the tension of the past few hours. Built for long-range missions, it had the capacity to house the entire research team while they planned their next move. Captain Maria Santos greeted them at the airlock, her expression grim. "We've been monitoring the situation," she said. "Earth Command is not going to be happy about this." Price nodded. "We'll deal with the political fallout later. Right now, we need to focus on getting everyone off that planet safely." The second evacuation went as smoothly as the first. The creatures made no move to interfere with the human withdrawal, maintaining their perimeter but allowing the evacuation pods to launch without incident. By the time the final pod reached orbit, all 47 members of the research team were safely aboard the Endeavour. From orbit, they could see the research station sitting alone on the alien landscape. The creatures had completely withdrawn from the immediate area, but Sarah suspected they were still watching from hidden positions. The station looked almost forlorn, abandoned by its creators and rejected by its intended world. "So what now?" Rodriguez asked as they gathered in the ship's briefing room. Captain Santos pulled up a star chart on the main display. "We have enough supplies to reach the next system on the colonization list. Kepler 438b showed promise in the initial surveys." But Sarah found herself thinking about the creatures they had encountered. Their technology, their restraint, their obvious intelligence. Humanity had stumbled onto something far more significant than a potential colony world. They had made first contact. "We need to report this to Earth Command immediately," she said. "This changes everything about our expansion plans." Price was already drafting the report. First contact with an intelligent alien species, one with technology that surpassed human capabilities. The implications would reshape humanity's approach to space exploration for generations to come. As the Endeavour prepared for its jump to the next system, Sarah took one last look at Kepler 442b through the observation deck's viewport. The planet looked peaceful from orbit, its purple atmosphere swirling in complex patterns. But she knew that beneath those clouds lived beings who had just given humanity its first lesson in cosmic diplomacy. They had expected the creatures to react with fear when confronted with human technology and determination. Instead, the aliens had calmly assessed the situation, made their position clear, and enforced their territorial rights with overwhelming but restrained force. The creatures hadn't been afraid of the humans. The humans had been afraid of them. 6 months after the evacuation from Kepler 442b, Lieutenant James Rodriguez found himself aboard the newly commissioned USS Defiance, humanity's first dedicated military vessel designed specifically for deep space operations. The ship was a marvel of human engineering, built with every lesson learned from the encounter with the creatures that Earth Command had designated as the Architects. The name wasn't chosen randomly. Analysis of the abandoned research station had revealed something remarkable. The creatures hadn't simply driven the humans away, they had studied every piece of human technology left behind. Within weeks of the evacuation, orbital surveillance showed that they had begun incorporating human design elements into their own biomechanical systems. They were adapting. Rodriguez stood in the Defiance's armory, examining the new weapons systems that had been developed in response to the Architect threat. Gone were the hunting rifles and basic sidearms that had proven so inadequate on Kepler 442b. In their place were plasma rifles, electromagnetic pulse grenades, and armor-piercing ammunition designed specifically for penetrating biomechanical defenses. Impressive, isn't it? Colonel Marcus Kane emerged from behind a rack of assault rifles, his scarred face wearing an expression of satisfaction. Kane was Earth Command Specialist in Hostile Alien Contact, brought out of retirement specifically to deal with the Architect situation. His experience in conflicts on Mars and Europa had made him legendary among military circles. The new gear is certainly an upgrade, Rodriguez agreed, hefting one of the plasma rifles. The weapon was heavier than traditional firearms, but its power output was devastating. But will it be enough? Kane's smile was grim. That's what we're here to find out. The Defiance was carrying a full Marine battalion, 800 of humanity's finest soldiers equipped with the most advanced weapons Earth could produce. Their mission was simple in concept but complex in execution: return to Kepler 442b and establish a permanent human presence, regardless of Architect objections. The political pressure had been immense. The loss of the research station had been seen as a humiliating defeat for humanity, a sign that they were not ready to claim their place among the stars. Public opinion demanded action, and Earth Command had responded with overwhelming force. Dr. Sarah Chen was also aboard the Defiance, though she had protested the mission's military nature from the beginning. Her attempts to convince Earth Command that diplomacy should be the priority had fallen on deaf ears. The Architects had shown their hand, demonstrating technology superior to humanity's. In the minds of military planners, this made them a threat that needed to be neutralized. Sarah made her way to the science labs, where Dr. Webb was analyzing the latest intelligence gathered from long-range surveillance of Kepler 442b. The news was not encouraging. "They've been busy," Webb said without looking up from his screens. "The Architect population in the research station area has tripled since our evacuation." Sarah studied the data. The surveillance showed massive construction activity around the former human research station. The Architects were building something, and it was clearly military in nature. "Fortifications?" she asked. "More than that," Webb replied. "They're creating a defensive network that covers the entire continent. Underground tunnels, weapons emplacements, what appears to be a command and control center built directly beneath our old research station." The implications were clear. The Architects weren't just defending their breeding grounds anymore, they were preparing for war. "Have you shown this to Colonel Kane?" Sarah asked. Webb nodded grimly. "He's convinced it proves the Architects are planning to expand their territory, possibly launch attacks on other human colonies." Sarah knew that Kane's interpretation was probably wrong. The Architects were responding to the obvious threat posed by humanity's return in force. They were preparing to defend themselves, not planning conquest. But she also knew that explaining this to military minds focused on victory would be futile. The journey to Kepler 442b took 3 weeks, during which the Defiance's crew prepared for what many believed would be humanity's first interstellar war. The Marines drilled constantly, practicing assault scenarios and defensive strategies. The ship's weapons systems were tested and retested, their targeting computers programmed with every scrap of data about Architect technology. Rodriguez found himself caught between two worlds. His military training told him to trust in superior firepower and aggressive tactics. But his experience on the research station had shown him the intelligence and restraint of the Architects. These weren't mindless monsters, they were sophisticated beings with their own culture and motivations. Having doubts? Captain Maria Santos found him in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. She had volunteered to command the Defiance's support operations, bringing her knowledge of the Kepler system to the military mission. "Wondering if we're making a mistake," Rodriguez admitted. "The Architects had every opportunity to kill us during the evacuation. They chose not to. That has to count for something." Santos nodded. "I've been thinking the same thing. But Earth Command sees restraint as a weakness to be exploited, not a strength to be respected." The conversation was interrupted by the ship's intercom announcing their arrival at Kepler 442b. Rodriguez and Santos made their way to the bridge, where Colonel Kane was coordinating the initial assault plans. The planet looked different from orbit. Where before there had been pristine purple landscapes, now there were visible scars of construction activity. The architects had been busy indeed, and their preparations were obvious even from space. Multiple defensive installations confirmed, the tactical officer reported. Energy signatures suggest weapons systems far more powerful than what we encountered at the research station. Kane studied the data with professional interest. They'd had 6 months to prepare. That means they know we're coming. Sir, the communications officer interrupted, we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. Kane's expression sharpened. Put it through. The main screen flickered to life, showing the familiar form of an architect. But this one was different from the creatures they had encountered before. Its biomechanical armor was more elaborate, incorporating design elements that were clearly derived from human technology. It spoke in perfectly clear English. Human vessels, you are not welcome in this system. Withdraw immediately, or face the consequences of your aggression. The bridge fell silent. The architect's use of fluent English was shocking enough, but its tone was unmistakably military. These beings had not only learned human language but had apparently studied human military protocols as well. Kane stepped forward. This is Colonel Marcus Kane of the Earth Defense Forces. We are here to establish a permanent human presence on this world. Stand down your weapons and prepare for negotiations. The architect's response was immediate and chilling. There will be no negotiations, Colonel Kane. You have been warned. Any attempt to land military forces will be met with total resistance. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. They know who I am, Kane said quietly. They've been studying us just as intensively as we've been studying them. Rodriguez felt a chill run down his spine. The architects hadn't just learned human language, they had gathered intelligence on specific human personnel. They knew exactly who they were dealing with. Sir, the sensor operator called out, we're detecting massive energy buildups on the planet's surface. Multiple locations. The tactical display updated to show dozens of energy signatures across the continent below. Each one represented a weapons system capable of engaging targets in orbit. They can reach us up here? Kane asked. Based on these energy levels, absolutely, the tactical officer confirmed. We're well within their engagement envelope. Kane made his decision quickly. Begin landing operations. First wave, immediate deployment. Sir, Rodriguez found himself speaking before he could stop himself, maybe we should reconsider. They're obviously prepared for this. Kane's stare was ice cold. Lieutenant, your job is to follow orders, not question strategy. The Marines will establish a beachhead whether the architects like it or not. The first wave of landing craft launched 15 minutes later, carrying 200 Marines toward the planet's surface. Rodriguez watched from the tactical center as the craft descended through the atmosphere, their heat shields glowing against the purple sky. The architect response was swift and devastating. Energy beams lanced up from hidden positions, striking the leading landing craft with precision that spoke of advanced targeting systems. The first transport exploded in a brilliant flash, taking 20 Marines with it. The second craft managed to deploy countermeasures, but a follow-up strike crippled its engines and sent it spinning toward the ground. Evasive maneuvers. Kane ordered, but the landing craft were sitting ducks against the planetary defenses. Of the 10 transports in the first wave, only 3 managed to reach the surface intact. The surviving Marines found themselves pinned down immediately, facing architect forces that had prepared killing zones with methodical precision. This is Alpha Team, came the frantic radio transmission. We're taking heavy casualties. These aren't the same creatures we faced before. Rodriguez could see the combat footage streaming from the Marines' helmet cameras. The architects engaging the human forces were larger than those encountered at the research station, their biomechanical armor heavier and more sophisticated. Most disturbing of all, they were using weapons that appeared to be hybrid human architect technology. They've reverse-engineered our weapons systems, Dr. Webb observed from his position at a science console. But they've improved them. It was true. The architect weapons combined the raw power of their biomechanical technology with the precision and reliability of human engineering. They had taken the best of both technologies and created something superior to either. Second wave, prepare for immediate deployment, Kane ordered. Sir, Captain Santos intervened, we're losing the first wave. Sending more troops down there is suicide. Kane's face was flushed with anger and frustration. We are not going to be defeated by a bunch of overgrown insects. But the tactical situation was clear to everyone on the bridge. The architects had used the 6-month interval to prepare a defense that neutralized every human advantage. They had studied human tactics, reverse-engineered human technology, and prepared countermeasures for every possible assault strategy. The Marines on the surface were fighting for their lives against an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. The architects moved with coordinated precision, using the terrain to maximum advantage while denying the humans any opportunity to establish a defensive position. Alpha Team is down to 12 effectives, came the next radio transmission. Requesting immediate extraction. But extraction was impossible. The architect air defenses had created an impenetrable umbrella over the landing zone. Any rescue attempt would result in even more casualties. Rodriguez found himself thinking about the creature that had warned them during their first encounter. It had given them time to evacuate, shown restraint when it could have simply destroyed the research station. These new architects showed no such restraint. They fought with the cold efficiency of soldiers defending their homeland against invaders. Sir, the communications officer announced, we're receiving another transmission from the surface. The main screen showed the same architect commander who had warned them earlier. But now its armor bore scorch marks from battle, and its tone had shifted from diplomatic to grimly satisfied. Colonel Kane, your forces are defeated. Withdraw your remaining troops, or we will destroy your ship. Kane's response was predictable. We don't negotiate with terrorists. The architect's reaction was swift. Energy signatures appeared all across the planet's surface, far more powerful than the weapons that had destroyed the landing craft. These were orbital bombardment weapons, capable of destroying the Defiance from the planet's surface. Sir, the sensor operator reported, his voice shaking, they're targeting our ship. Multiple lock-ons confirmed. Kane stared at the tactical display, finally, understanding the scope of the architect preparation. They hadn't just prepared to defend against a human landing, they had prepared to destroy any human presence in their system. All stations, prepare for emergency jump to FTL, Kane ordered. But the architect commander wasn't finished. Colonel Kane, your species made a critical error. You assumed that because we chose mercy during your first encounter, we were weak. You assumed that because our technology appeared biological, it was primitive. You assumed that because we avoided conflict, we were incapable of war. The energy signatures on the planet's surface continued to build, reaching levels that would easily penetrate the Defiance's shields. You were wrong on all counts, the architect continued. We chose mercy because we hoped your species could learn wisdom. We avoided conflict because we value life, even human life. But your return in force has demonstrated that your species values only conquest and dominance. Rodriguez understood the message. Humanity had been given a chance to learn from their first encounter, to approach the architects with respect and diplomacy. Instead, they had chosen violence and aggression. The architects had prepared accordingly. You have 1 minute to begin evacuation procedures for your surviving ground forces, the architect commander stated. After that, we will consider any human presence in this system to be an act of war. Kane's military pride warred with tactical reality. The Defiance could destroy the planet's surface from orbit, but that would mean genocide against an intelligent species. It would also mean accepting responsibility for starting humanity's first interstellar war. Begin emergency extraction of ground forces, he ordered quietly. The extraction was a nightmare of precision flying and desperate improvisation. The architect air defenses allowed the rescue shuttles to approach the landing zone but made it clear that any delay would result in their destruction. Of the 200 Marines in the first wave, only 47 survived to be extracted. As the Defiance prepared for its emergency jump to FTL, Rodriguez took one last look at Kepler 442b through the observation deck viewport. The planet looked peaceful again, its purple atmosphere hiding the sophisticated military installations that had just demonstrated humanity's limitations. The architects had expected fear from the human military response. Instead, they had calmly assessed the threat, prepared countermeasures, and demonstrated that superior technology combined with intelligent strategy could defeat raw human aggression. Humanity had just learned that they were not the apex species they had imagined themselves to be. The journey back to Earth was conducted in grim silence. The Defiance carried the survivors of humanity's first military defeat in space, along with the sobering knowledge that the galaxy was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Colonel Kane spent most of the journey in his quarters, writing reports that would reshape humanity's approach to space exploration. The age of casual expansion was over. From now on, every human venture into space would have to account for the possibility of encountering species more advanced than themselves. Dr. Saracen used the journey to analyze everything they had learned about architect technology and strategy. The beings they had encountered were not just intelligent, they were strategic thinkers capable of long-term planning and technological adaptation. They had turned humanity's own advantages against them with surgical precision. But Rodriguez found himself thinking about something else entirely. The architect commander had spoken of mercy and the value of life. Even in victory, even after destroying most of the human landing force, they had allowed the survivors to be extracted. The architects were not just superior in technology and strategy. They were superior in wisdom and restraint. Humanity had a lot to learn from them, if they could overcome their pride enough to listen. 2 years had passed since the military disaster at Kepler 442b, and humanity was a changed species. The revelation that they were not alone in the galaxy, and that other intelligent species possessed technology superior to their own, had fundamentally altered human civilization. Dr. Saracen now served as director of the newly established Department of Xenological Studies, a position that carried both enormous responsibility and constant frustration. Her offices in the Geneva complex overlooked Lake Geneva, but she rarely had time to appreciate the view. Every day brought new challenges as humanity struggled to adapt to their changed circumstances. The political fallout from the Defiance incident had been severe. Colonel Kane had been court-martialed and sentenced to military prison, though many considered him a scapegoat for Earth Command's aggressive policies. The military leadership had been completely restructured, with emphasis shifting from conquest to defense and diplomacy. But the real changes were happening in human society itself. The psychological impact has been more significant than we anticipated, Dr. Elena Vasquez explained as she presented her latest report to the Xenological Council. As humanity's leading expert in species psychology, she had been studying the effects of the architect encounters on human behavior and society. Depression rates have increased by 40% since the Kepler incident, she continued. Suicide rates are up 30%. We're seeing a crisis of confidence in human exceptionalism that's affecting every aspect of society. Sarah nodded grimly. The revelation that humanity was not the apex species they had imagined themselves to be had shattered many fundamental assumptions about human destiny among the stars. The religious implications alone had triggered massive social upheaval. What about the positive responses? Asked Dr. James Morrison, the Council's military liaison. Morrison had served under Rodriguez during the evacuation and had been promoted after demonstrating remarkable restraint and tactical intelligence during the crisis. Vasquez switched to her next set of data. Interestingly, we're also seeing unprecedented growth in scientific research and technological development. It's as if the challenge posed by the architects has motivated humanity to accelerate their advancement. That was certainly true in Sarah's experience. The past 2 years had seen breakthrough after breakthrough in human technology. Plasma weapons, biomechanical interfaces, advanced artificial intelligence, and, most importantly, improved faster-than-light communication systems that allowed real-time coordination across interstellar distances. But the most significant development was taking place in a classified facility beneath the Swiss Alps, where humanity's brightest minds were working on what they called the Prometheus Project. Dr. Marcus Webb had been placed in charge of Prometheus after his analysis of architect technology had proven remarkably accurate. The project's goal was ambitious: reverse engineer architect biomechanical technology and integrate it with human systems to create hybrid technologies that surpassed anything either species had developed alone. Sarah made her way to the Prometheus facility after the council meeting, taking the high-speed elevator down 30 floors into the mountain. The facility was a marvel of engineering, with laboratories that could contain and analyze alien technology under the most secure conditions possible. Webb met her at the main laboratory entrance, his excitement barely contained. "Sarah, you have to see this. We've had a breakthrough." The laboratory beyond was filled with equipment that would have seemed like magic just 5 years earlier. Biomechanical components grew in nutrient tanks, their organic circuits pulsing with electronic signals. Human-designed processors interface seamlessly with architect biotechnology, creating hybrid systems that exhibited properties neither species could achieve alone. "We've successfully integrated architect biomechanical processors with human quantum computing systems," Webb explained, leading her to a central workstation. "The result is a computational matrix that operates at levels we never thought possible." Sarah studied the display showing the hybrid system's performance metrics. The numbers were staggering. Processing speeds that exceeded human technology by orders of magnitude, while maintaining the adaptive capabilities that made architect biotechnology so effective. "Have you tested practical applications?" she asked. Webb's grin was answer enough. He led her to another section of the laboratory where a prototype weapon system was mounted on a testing platform. The device was clearly a hybrid design, combining the sleek efficiency of human engineering with the organic curves of architect biotechnology. "Watch this," Webb said, initiating a test sequence. The weapon powered up with a sound unlike anything in human technology, a harmonic resonance that seemed to emerge from the biomechanical components. When it fired, the energy beam was perfectly controlled, striking a series of targets with precision that would have been impossible with either human or architect technology alone. "Incredible," Sarah breathed. "But, Webb, have you considered the implications of what we're doing here?" Webb's expression sobered slightly. "You mean the ethical considerations?" "Exactly. We're using technology derived from studying the architects without their consent. In essence, we're stealing their innovations and adapting them for our own purposes." It was a debate that had raged within the scientific community since the Prometheus project began. The technology they had recovered from the abandoned research station on Kepler 442b had been analyzed without any input from its creators. Humanity was essentially conducting technological espionage on an interstellar scale. But the military arguments were compelling. If humanity was going to survive in a galaxy populated by species more advanced than themselves, they needed every technological advantage they could develop. "The way I see it," Webb said, "we're doing what humans have always done. We're adapting and improving." The architects developed biomechanical technology, but they never combined it with quantum computing systems. "We're not just copying their work, we're advancing it." Sarah had to admit that Webb's point was valid. The hybrid technologies being developed at Prometheus were genuinely innovative, representing advances that neither species could have achieved alone. But the ethical questions remained troubling. Her contemplation was interrupted by an urgent alert signal. Throughout the facility, red lights began flashing and a recorded voice announced a priority communication from deep space monitoring stations. Sarah and Webb rushed to the facility's communication center, where a crowd of researchers and technicians were gathered around the main display. What they saw there changed everything. The display showed long-range scanner data from the frontier monitoring stations, automated platforms positioned at the edge of human space to provide early warning of potential threats. One of these platforms had detected something unprecedented, a massive fleet of unknown ships approaching human space at incredible speed. "How many vessels?" someone asked. The technician at the main console checked his readings. "At least 200 confirmed contacts. Possibly more. They're using some kind of stealth technology that's interfering with our sensors." Sarah felt her blood run cold. 200 ships represented a fleet large enough to threaten every human colony simultaneously. If this was an architect invasion force, humanity's defenses would be completely overwhelmed. "What's their estimated time of arrival at Earth?" she asked. "Based on current speed and trajectory, approximately 72 hours, came the reply. The facility erupted into controlled chaos as researchers began analyzing the scanner data and contacting Earth Command with their findings. But Sarah found herself studying the display with growing confusion. The approaching fleet wasn't heading directly for Earth or any of the major human colonies. Instead, their trajectory would bring them to the edge of human space, where they seemed to be establishing some kind of perimeter. "They're not attacking," she said, loud enough for the others to hear. "They're positioning themselves defensively." Dr. Morrison, who had arrived from Earth Command within minutes of the alert, studied the tactical display. "You're right. This looks like a blockade formation, not an assault pattern." The implications were staggering. If the architects were establishing a blockade around human space, it suggested they were preparing for something much larger than a simple military action. Over the next 24 hours, the picture became clearer. The approaching fleet was indeed composed of architect vessels, but they were unlike anything humanity had encountered before. These ships were massive, clearly designed for long-range operations and extended deployment. When the fleet reached its destination, they began broadcasting a message on all frequencies, in perfect English. "Greetings to the leadership of the human species. We are representatives of the Architect Collective, here to establish formal diplomatic contact with your civilization." The message sent shock waves through human government and society. After 2 years of preparing for potential war with the architects, they were offering diplomacy. Earth Command's response was swift and decisive. A delegation would be assembled to meet with the architect representatives, with Dr. Sarah Chin serving as the chief scientific advisor and Dr. Morrison providing military expertise. The meeting was scheduled to take place aboard the neutral trading station Concordia, positioned at the edge of human space. The station had been constructed specifically for potential diplomatic contacts with alien species, though no one had expected to use it so soon. Sarah found herself aboard the diplomatic vessel UNS Harmony as it approached Concordia. The station was an impressive sight, a wheel-shaped structure rotating slowly to provide artificial gravity. Its design emphasized peaceful intentions, with no visible weapon systems and large observation decks designed for multi-species meetings. The architect diplomatic vessel was already docked when they arrived. Sarah got her first close look at architect shipbuilding technology, and the sight was both beautiful and intimidating. The ship appeared to be grown rather than built, its organic curves suggesting living architecture rather than mechanical construction. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez, James Rodriguez's sister and one of Earth's most experienced diplomats, led the human delegation. She had been chosen specifically because of her family's previous contact with the architects, though she had no direct experience with alien species herself. The meeting chamber aboard Concordia had been designed to accommodate a wide variety of alien physiologies. The architect delegation consisted of 3 individuals, each representing a different aspect of their civilization. Sarah recognized the types from their previous encounters: a military commander, a scientist, and what appeared to be a political leader. The political leader spoke first, its biomechanical translator rendering its words into perfect English. "We are honored to establish formal contact with the human species. I am Harmony Singer of Deep Currents, speaking for the Collective Council." Ambassador Rodriguez responded with equal formality. "We welcome this opportunity for peaceful contact. I am Ambassador Elena Rodriguez, speaking for the United Earth Government." The exchange of pleasantries continued for several minutes, but Sarah found herself studying the architect's scientific representative. Unlike the others, this individual seemed intensely curious about the human delegation, its multiple eyes focusing on each human in turn. "We have come to discuss the future relationship between our species," Harmony Singer continued. "The events at Kepler 442b demonstrated that our peoples have much to learn from each other." The statement was diplomatically phrased, but Sarah understood the underlying message. The architects had studied humanity's response to their first encounter and found it educational, though not necessarily in a positive way. "We acknowledge that our initial approach was flawed," Ambassador Rodriguez replied. We failed to recognize your prior claims to Kepler 442b and responded to your legitimate territorial concerns with aggression. It was as close to an apology as human pride would allow, but it seemed to satisfy the architect delegation. Harmony Singer's posture relaxed slightly, and the military commander lowered what Sarah now recognized as threat assessment sensors. Your species shows promise, the scientific representative spoke for the first time. We have observed your technological adaptations over the past 2 years. Your innovation rate is impressive. Sarah felt a chill of recognition. The architects had been watching humanity's technological development since the Kepler incident. They knew about the Prometheus project and the hybrid technologies being developed. We would like to propose a formal technological exchange program, Harmony Singer continued. Your species possesses certain innovations that would benefit our civilization, just as our biomechanical expertise could accelerate your development. The proposal was unprecedented in human history. An alien species with superior technology was offering to share their knowledge in exchange for human innovations. It represented an opportunity that could advance human civilization by centuries. But Sarah also recognized the implications. The architects weren't just offering technology, they were offering to integrate humanity into a larger galactic civilization. They were offering partnership between species. What would such an exchange entail? Ambassador Rodriguez asked. The scientific representative activated a holographic display that showed star charts of unprecedented detail. The map revealed something that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. The galaxy was populated by dozens of intelligent species, all connected through a vast network of trade routes and diplomatic relationships. Humanity had not discovered an empty galaxy waiting for colonization, they had stumbled into a complex civilization that spanned hundreds of worlds. The Galactic Cooperative consists of 47 member species, Harmony Singer explained. We serve as one of the founding members and have been authorized to evaluate humanity's potential for membership. The revelation was staggering. Humanity had assumed they were alone in the galaxy, or at most would encounter a few scattered alien species. Instead, they were being invited to join a galactic civilization that had existed for thousands of years. What would membership require? Dr. Morrison asked, his military training focusing on practical considerations. Acceptance of the cooperative's fundamental principles, the military commander replied. Peaceful resolution of disputes, respect for territorial sovereignty, and commitment to mutual defense against external threats. Sarah understood the real message. The galactic civilization had rules, and humanity would need to demonstrate that they could follow those rules before being accepted as full members. The events at Kepler 442b were essentially a test, she said, speaking for the first time during the meeting. All 3 architect representatives focused their attention on her. An astute observation, Dr. Chen. Your species' initial response to territorial challenge was disappointing. However, your subsequent restraint and diplomatic approach suggest capacity for growth. The architects had been evaluating humanity from the beginning. The encounter at the research station, the military response, and now the diplomatic contact were all part of an extended assessment process. We are prepared to begin limited technological exchange immediately, Harmony Singer announced. Full membership in the cooperative will be determined based on your species' development over the next decade. Ambassador Rodriguez looked to Sarah and Dr. Morrison for guidance. This was a decision that would reshape human civilization, opening up possibilities that had existed only in science fiction. But it also represented a challenge. Humanity would need to prove themselves worthy of galactic citizenship, demonstrating wisdom and restraint in addition to technological capability. We accept your proposal for technological exchange, Ambassador Rodriguez said finally. And we commit to working toward full membership in the Galactic Cooperative. The formal signing of the preliminary agreements took place over the following week, with each side exchanging preliminary technological samples and establishing communication protocols for ongoing contact. When Sarah returned to Earth, she carried with her architect biomechanical samples that would revolutionize human technology. But, more importantly, she carried the knowledge that humanity was no longer alone in the galaxy. The architects had expected fear from humanity's response to galactic citizenship. Instead, humans had done what they always did when faced with impossible challenges. They adapted, they learned, and they prepared to reload for the next challenge. 10 years had passed since humanity's first contact with the Galactic Cooperative, and Dr. Sarah Chen barely recognized the species her people had become. Standing on the observation deck of the UNS Prometheus, humanity's first biomechanical starship, she watched the fleet of combined human and alien vessels preparing for what would become known as the Battle of the Void Gates. The ship around her was a testament to human adaptability. The Prometheus represented the culmination of a decade of technological exchange with the Architect Collective and other cooperative species. Its hull combined human metallurgy with Architect biomechanical systems, while its weapons incorporated innovations from the Crystal and Tessari and the energy-manipulating Vorlons. But, more than the technology had changed. Humanity itself had evolved. Captain James Rodriguez, now bearing the rank insignia of the Cooperative Defense Force, approached the observation deck. His cybernetic enhancements were clearly visible, biomechanical interfaces that allowed him to commune directly with the ship's hybrid systems. Like many humans who worked closely with alien technology, he had chosen to undergo enhancement procedures that would have been unthinkable a decade earlier. "The final fleet elements have arrived," he reported. "We're looking at the largest combined force in cooperative history. 12 species, over 3,000 vessels." Sarah nodded, though her attention was focused on the enemy they faced. Through the observation deck's viewport, she could see the void gates in the distance, massive artificial constructs that floated in deep space like cosmic doorways. Beyond those gates lay the territory of the Devourers, the extragalactic threat that had united every cooperative species in desperate alliance. The Devourers had arrived 18 months earlier, emerging from the space between galaxies with technology that made even the most advanced cooperative systems seem primitive. They consumed matter at the quantum level, breaking down planets, stars, and entire solar systems to fuel their incomprehensible machinery. Worse, they showed no interest in communication or negotiation. Every attempt at contact had been met with immediate destruction of the messenger vessels. The Devourers appeared to view all forms of matter-based life as resources to be harvested. "Status report on the human contingent?" Sarah asked. Rodriguez consulted his biomechanical interface, data flowing directly into his enhanced consciousness. "All 57 human vessels report ready for combat. The hybrid weapon systems are performing beyond specifications." Sarah felt a mixture of pride and concern. 57 ships might seem insignificant compared to the 3,000 vessel fleet, but the human contingent represented something unique in cooperative history. Every human vessel incorporated technology from multiple alien species, creating hybrid systems that often performed better than the sum of their parts. It was a reflection of humanity's greatest strength and greatest weakness, their willingness to abandon their original nature in pursuit of improvement. Dr. Marcus Webb materialized beside them, his form flickering slightly as his consciousness transferred from the ship's biomechanical neural network back to his physical body. Webb had undergone the most extreme enhancement of any human, allowing his mind to interface directly with alien computational systems. "The tactical analysis is complete," he announced, his voice carrying harmonic overtones from his biomechanical vocal enhancements. "The Devourers have positioned defensive installations around each void gate. Conventional assault would result in 93% casualties." "And unconventional assault?" Rodriguez asked. Webb's enhanced features displayed what might have been a smile. "That's where human innovation comes into play." Over the past year, human engineers had been working on what they called the Cascade Protocol, a strategy that utilized the unique properties of their hybrid technology to create a devastating feedback effect in the void gates themselves. It was a desperate plan, requiring precise coordination between multiple species and technologies that had never been tested under combat conditions. "The architects have agreed to provide biomechanical support," Webb continued. "The Tessari will handle crystal and resonance amplification, and the Vorlons will manipulate the energy matrices. But the core coordination requires human neural interfaces." Sarah understood the implications. Humans would serve as the central nervous system for an attack involving 12 different species and their technologies. It was a role that only humanity could fill, because only humans had been willing to integrate alien enhancements to the degree necessary for multi-species coordination. "Are we ready?" she asked. Rodriguez nodded. "As ready as we'll ever be. Though I have to admit, the irony isn't lost on me." "What irony?" 10 years ago, we thought we were the apex species, destined to rule the galaxy through superior firepower. Now we're serving as living interfaces in a desperate defensive action against enemies we barely understand. Sarah considered his words. It was true that humanity's role in the galaxy had turned out very differently than anyone had expected. Instead of becoming galactic conquerors, humans had become the cooperative specialists in technological integration and adaptive innovation. But perhaps that was exactly what the galaxy needed. The battle began with a coordinated assault by the Vanguard forces, designed to test Devourer defensive capabilities and gather final intelligence. Sarah watched from the tactical center as hundreds of vessels engaged the enemy installations surrounding the Void Gates. The Devourer response was swift and terrifying. Weapons that operated on principles unknown to cooperative science tore through the strongest defensive shields as if they were paper. Entire vessels simply ceased to exist, their matter converted to energy to fuel the enemy war machine. "Casualty report," Rodriguez requested. 47 vessels lost in the first wave, came the reply from the Fleet Coordination Center. Devourer defensive capabilities exceed our projections by 30%. But the assault had served its purpose. The attacking vessels had gathered crucial data about Devourer technology and defensive patterns, information that Webb's enhanced consciousness was already integrating into the Cascade Protocol calculations. Implementing Phase 2, he announced, his awareness expanding across the entire fleet through quantum-entangled communication networks. Sarah felt the change as it rippled through the human vessels. Neural interfaces activated across 57 ships, connecting human consciousness with alien technology in ways that would have been impossible without a decade of gradual enhancement and adaptation. Captain Rodriguez served as the primary coordination node, his enhanced mind simultaneously processing tactical data from 12 species while maintaining conscious control of the Prometheus's hybrid weapon systems. Through him, human innovation merged with architect biomechanics, Tessari crystal matrices, and Vorlon energy manipulation. The combined fleet began its final approach to the Void Gates, each vessel precisely positioned according to calculations that required processing power beyond any single species' capabilities. Only the hybrid human-alien consciousness network could coordinate the complex interactions necessary for the Cascade Protocol. The Devourers responded predictably, concentrating their fire on what they perceived as the primary threat. But their targeting systems were designed for conventional warfare against single-species technology. They couldn't adapt quickly enough to the hybrid systems that combined the best features of multiple alien technologies. Human vessels equipped with architect biomechanical hulls absorbed damage that should have been fatal, then regenerated while Tessari crystal weapons struck back with precision guided by Vorlon energy detection systems. Each human ship fought like a miniature representation of the entire cooperative, adaptable and resilient in ways no pure species technology could match. Initiating Cascade Protocol, Webb announced, his consciousness stretching across the quantum foam to interface with alien technologies scattered throughout the fleet. What happened next had never been attempted before in galactic history. 12 species, working through human neural coordination, began to manipulate the fundamental structure of the Void Gates themselves. Architect biomechanical systems interfaced with the organic components of the gates. Tessari crystal matrices resonated with the gate's harmonic frequencies. Vorlon energy manipulation twisted the spatial distortions that allowed the gates to function. And human neural networks coordinated it all, processing feedback from every system simultaneously. The effect was spectacular. The Void Gates, massive constructs that had seemed indestructible, began to collapse in on themselves. The spatial distortions that allowed them to function became increasingly unstable, creating feedback effects that spread through the entire Devourer defensive network. "It's working," Sarah breathed, watching as enemy installations began to tear themselves apart under the influence of cascading spatial distortions. But the Devourers weren't defeated yet. As their defensive installations collapsed, massive vessels began emerging from the gates themselves, craft that dwarfed even the largest cooperative ships. These were the primary Devourer warforms, and they represented technology beyond anything the galaxy had encountered. New contacts, the sensor operator announced. Confirmed Devourer primary assets. Displacement equivalent to small moons. The final phase of the battle had begun. Captain Rodriguez felt his consciousness expand as every human in the fleet linked their neural interfaces in a desperate attempt to coordinate a defense against the emerging Devourer forces. Through 57 minds simultaneously, he experienced the battle from every angle, processing tactical data at speeds no biological brain could achieve alone. The Devourer primary assets attacked with weapons that violated several fundamental laws of physics. Matter simply ceased to exist where their energy beams struck, creating expanding zones of nothingness that threatened to consume everything in their path. But the human-coordinated defense adapted in real time. Architect biomechanical hulls reshaped themselves to deflect attacks along impossible angles. Tesserae crystal shields resonated at frequencies that disrupted the enemy weapon's quantum signatures. Vorlon energy systems created spatial distortions that redirected destructive forces back at their sources. And, through it all, human neural networks processed the overwhelming complexity, finding patterns in the chaos and coordinating responses that no single species could have conceived. Sarah watched as the UNS Defiance, the ship that had carried humanity's first disastrous assault on Kepler 442b, now fought with weapons and tactics that represented the best innovations of 12 species. The ship that had once symbolized human arrogance now embodied human adaptability. The battle raged for hours, with casualties mounting on both sides. But, gradually, the Cascade Protocol began to achieve its intended effect. The collapsing void gates created spatial instabilities that interfered with Devourer technology, reducing their effectiveness while having minimal impact on cooperative hybrid systems. The gates are reaching critical instability, Webb reported, his enhanced awareness tracking quantum fluctuations across multiple dimensional layers. Cascade completion in 90 seconds. The final moments of the battle were almost anticlimactic. As the void gates collapsed completely, the spatial distortions they created tore through the remaining Devourer forces like a cosmic storm. The massive primary assets, for all their technological superiority, couldn't adapt quickly enough to the changing conditions. Within minutes, the Devourer forces were retreating through emergency spatial rifts, abandoning their installations and fleeing back to the space between galaxies. The cooperative fleet had won, but at tremendous cost. Over 800 vessels had been destroyed, representing species from across the galaxy. The victory had been purchased with the lives of millions of sentient beings. But humanity's role in the victory hadn't gone unnoticed. In the aftermath of the battle, as the combined fleet regrouped and began search and rescue operations, Sarah found herself summoned to a meeting of the Cooperative High Council. The gathering took place aboard the Architect flagship, in a chamber designed to accommodate representatives from dozens of different species. Harmony Singer of Deep Currents, now bearing the ceremonial markings of a High Council speaker, addressed the assembled representatives. The Battle of the Void Gates has demonstrated the necessity of continued cooperation between our species. But it has also revealed something unprecedented. The speaker's attention turned to the human delegation. The hybrid technologies developed through human innovation have proven superior to pure species systems. Your people's willingness to adapt and integrate has created capabilities that none of US could achieve alone. Dr. Morrison, now bearing the biomechanical enhancements that marked senior cooperative officials, stepped forward. We are honored by your recognition, Speaker. But our innovations were only possible because of the knowledge freely shared by cooperative species. Nevertheless, another council member interjected, this one a crystalline tesserae whose geometric form sparkled with internal light. Human adaptability has proven to be the key factor in our victory. Your species has demonstrated abilities that qualify you for advanced membership status. Sarah felt a moment of profound recognition. Advanced membership in the Galactic Cooperative would mean that humanity would be considered equal to the founding species, with full access to their most advanced technologies and participation in major policy decisions. It was an achievement that would have seemed impossible during humanity's first encounter with the architects on Kepler 442b. However, Harmony Singer continued, advanced membership requires unanimous approval from all council species. There is one matter that must be addressed. The chamber fell silent as the speaker's attention focused on the human delegation. Your species' willingness to undergo biological and technological enhancement has been essential to our recent victory. But some council members question whether enhanced humans can still be considered the same species that first achieved spaceflight. The question struck to the heart of humanity's transformation over the past decade. Dr. Webb, with his biomechanical neural interfaces, was clearly no longer entirely human in the traditional sense. Captain Rodriguez and thousands of others had undergone enhancements that fundamentally altered their biology and psychology. Were enhanced humans still human? Or had they become something new? Sarah stepped forward, drawing on her authority as humanity's senior xenological expert. Honored council members, our species has indeed undergone significant changes since first contact. But these changes represent the natural evolution of human adaptability. She activated a holographic display showing human development over the past decade. Humans have always been defined by our ability to adapt to new environments and challenges. Our ancestors survived ice ages by developing new tools and techniques. We colonized harsh environments by creating new technologies. The display showed the progression from baseline human to the enhanced individuals who now serve throughout the cooperative fleet. Our current enhancements are simply the latest expression of human adaptability. We have not abandoned our human nature, we have expressed it in new ways. The council members deliberated for several hours, representing the first time in cooperative history that the definition of a species had been formally debated. In the end, the decision was unanimous. Humanity would be granted advanced membership, with the understanding that their enhanced variants represented natural evolution rather than the creation of a new species. As Sarah returned to the Prometheus, she reflected on the journey her species had taken. 10 years earlier, humans had expected to conquer the galaxy through superior firepower and aggressive expansion. They had assumed that alien species would fear human determination and technological prowess. Instead, they had discovered that the galaxy was far more complex and dangerous than they had imagined. They had faced species with superior technology, learned to integrate alien innovations, and ultimately helped defend galactic civilization against extragalactic threats. The architects and other cooperative species had expected fear from humanity's response to galactic citizenship. They had expected humans to resist integration or to pursue dominance through force. Instead, humans had done what they always did when faced with impossible challenges: they adapted, they innovated, and they found ways to make themselves essential to the larger community. Through the observation deck viewport, Sarah could see Earth's sun in the distance, no longer the center of an isolated human civilization but one star among millions in a galaxy where humanity had found its true calling. They hadn't conquered the galaxy through force. They had earned their place in it through adaptation. And, when the next crisis came, as it inevitably would in a galaxy full of wonders and terrors, humanity would be ready. They would adapt. They would innovate. They would reload for whatever came next.